Have you ever had a client reach out to you in a panic trying to bring you in to solve a problem that they created, even though it was outside the scope of your contract? That's what happened to me this week. That was how my Monday got started. I wanted to share about it a little bit in this vlog because this is something that happens to everyone. It doesn't matter how long you've been in business. It doesn't matter how long you've been freelancing or if you work at an agency or whatever. Projects will go wrong. Really what this situation comes down to is how do you keep boundaries with clients? There are some ways that I responded in this situation that seem to be helpful and work well, and so I wanted to share them this week on the vlog. So a friend and I were working on a project with this company. They reached out and they expressed interest in a website rebuild. As we had a lot of conversations with them on the front end, we realized that a discovery process would be super helpful, as well as a rebrand. That was something that was in their pipeline. But as we were talking about the website of things, it didn't really make sense to redo your whole website, then rebrand, and then have to figure out what does that mean for the website. You're kind of doing the same project twice. So in our initial conversations, we were able to talk about the design of this logo, the company voice. It's kind of what we cover in the discovery phase. So we were doing a lot of work for them. It turned into a pretty good sized project. The logo or the discovery process went well. It was very clear, direct. They had a good sense of who they want to become and the way they want to hone their company voice, their brand voice. The logo then flowed from that naturally, presented a bunch of options. They loved what we finished with. I love it too. Actually, I'm pretty excited about seeing it now live in the wild. And then the last project was, the last part was this web rebuild. So we transitioned it away from whatever they were doing. I don't know if they were just hosting it themselves, if it was built on WordPress. I don't know the details because all I know is we were moving to a new system. So we rebuilt this website on Squarespace for them. One of the priorities that we discovered early in the conversations was that they want this to be a site that's easy to manage. And so we landed on Squarespace because I felt like that was a really good option based on what their needs were and what Squarespace does for them. So we spent the last several months working on the website. It went a lot longer than I had anticipated, which is a good note for you and for me. Sometimes projects don't go according to the timeline that we guess that they will. That's okay. We still serve our clients well and invest and do good work. So we're finally there, right? It's now been months of time and we're finally ready to flip the switch. They wanted to be the ones who were transferring the DNS, which was fine with me. And actually part of our contract, we clarified that we will build it, but then they had the internal group to be able to navigate it from there. So we handed that off, we walked them through we shared the instructions that Squarespace provides and all of those details. So then Monday comes and I was expecting this to I thought it was going to transition over the weekend and apparently it didn't. And then Monday I learned why it didn't. They were having issues. Something happened. I don't fully know all of the details. All I know is that their website was down and that their email was down. In the grand scheme of like panic moments, if your website's down, that's not ideal. But when your email goes down, this is the way that your customers reach out to you. This is the way that you interface with, contractors or other employees, or the whole ecosystem of communication in the business is being driven through email. This is a pretty big problem. We didn't have anything to do with the way that their email functioned, with DNS records, any of that stuff. So I knew that this was a problem that was not within the scope of what we were originally stepping into as we were creating this website and rebrand and discovery process. So now we have the fork in the road. What in the world are we supposed to do in this situation? I can tell you honestly that Monday was really stressful for me. I'm getting ready in the morning and I'm looking at my email and I'm seeing this and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what do I do? My nature is to jump into problems like this and be like, I'll take care of it. Well, yeah, just give me the login information. I'll see what I can do. I'll get on tech support. But that wasn't the right answer. And so I tried something different. And it's something that has taken me many years to develop the ability to do, just because it's against my nature, really. But I just sort of let time pass. I decided to reach out to the person I was working alongside. It's a friend of mine, but so my friend who also runs a business. I said, hey, I don't know if you saw the emails, but their website's down and their email's down. So we actually hopped on a call, just me and him, and we talked through what the potential problems could be, and then we put together a game plan. And so in terms of things that can be helpful takeaways for you, and even things for me to kind of like log here in this vlog, to say, hey, keep doing that. This is something worth doing next time. Before you jump into any crisis, get an outside opinion. Have a conversation with somebody. It doesn't have to be, a person that you worked on the project with. In a lot of cases, I'm doing projects on my own, and so I don't have anybody that's, that deep in the project with me. But what I'll do is I'll reach out to a friend, or I'll reach out to, I guess a different friend. I would probably list them all as friends, but maybe you know people that are in a similar industry that you are in, or maybe you have friends that you could just, hey, can I just bounce this off of you? Like I'll talk to my wife about it. Hey, what do you think? That's a really helpful practice, because in the midst of these problems, especially, at least for the creatives that I've met, maybe you're wildly different, but most creatives that I know, deep down, we're problem solvers. We see the ability to solve a problem, a unique business problem, an awareness problem, a brand positioning problem, a technology problem. We see problems, and then we also see, how do we solve this? We see solutions. That's really what creative work often is, at least in our economy and in our, kind of our culture, the way that creativity and creative industries are positioned. We tend to be problem solvers. So that trains us in a way to jump in when there's a problem. So get an outside opinion. That was something that was really helpful for me in this situation, because then we were able to build a game plan. The other thing that it did, and this is another kind of big takeaway that I found to be, something I plan to continue to try to do as best I can. Don't let the urgency of the crisis from the business's end become your urgency. If you did something and you broke something, work really hard to fix it, of course. I'm not saying like, okay, now's a great time for me to plan a 2-week vacation. What I mean is, this is their problem to solve. And so you amping up and panicking about it doesn't help anybody, because ultimately they're already doing that. And so stay calm and recognize that this is just a problem to be solved. That's all it is. Even in the grand scheme of these catastrophic failures, the world goes on. And so the reality is that most of what we're doing isn't critically important in the grand scheme of things, meaning these little crises that feel so immediate and so big, they're really not as catastrophic as we often make them out to be. So now for you as the freelancer on the outside of this, you have the opportunity to be the calm one that can help encourage and guide the client without taking the crisis on as your own. Now, some of this stuff doesn't feel very tangible. It still doesn't feel like we're helping the client. It feels like we're just sort of figuring out ways to think about it. Practically speaking, something that I did in this situation was I guided the client. So I didn't go into the back end of the website and fix things. I didn't ask for their login information. I wasn't on the call with tech support, those kinds of things. But what I could do is I could navigate some of the areas of the systems that they weren't familiar with. So in the case of Squarespace, I'm pretty familiar with Squarespace. I've built a lot of websites on Squarespace over the years. And so I know where documentation is. I know how to navigate their search forums. And I know it sounds silly to say that, like, oh, all you're doing is searching for, search the answer that the client's having a problem with, and there you go. It's like, couldn't you have done that? Sure, they could have, but not in a crisis situation. And this is where there's a little bit of separation between don't involve yourselves at all, meaning don't do it, but also don't fully disengage. And so this to me is the middle ground that I try to strike. I try to be a guide. I try to be a help, but a help in a way that just directs them as they're looking. So I kind of think of it, this is a dramatic scenario, but like I think about it, if there's a house that's on fire and a firefighter comes up to you and says, there's somebody in the building, do you know where they are? I'm not strapping on all the equipment. I'm not, running into the building. I'm not finding where the person is and pulling them out, putting them on my shoulder and running out. But instead I'm saying, you know what? They're in the back bedroom. When you go down the hallway, turn left. That's what you're doing in this situation. You're guiding them in terms of how they can best solve the problem. And the reason I think this is an appropriate way for us to be involved with our clients as we're helping them navigate this crisis, really help them kind of get through it, is that you still want to position yourself as a benefit to the company. I think sometimes, to me, it's kind of like a reaction against employment. There are times where I'm like, no, I'm going to charge for everything. Like that's kind of where I want to be. I want to be like, I'm not doing anything for you unless you pay me. We develop that attitude. I really do think that that is because a lot of times in our day jobs, if we have a full-time job or come out of a full-time job, there's this tendency where people are like, oh, hey, you just do this thing now because we bought your time. We own you. There was a time, this drives me crazy. There was a time I was working on a deadline and it was like either my boss or my boss's boss comes into my office. So it's somebody that you listen to. And I said, Matt, we need your help. And I remember being really frustrated because I'm like, I'm on a deadline right now. And they knew it because it was for them. So I said, I'm in the middle of stuff. Like, can it wait? Like, can I finish what I'm working on? They said, no, we need you right now. This is really important. I'm like, fine. So I walk out of my office. Now I'm interrupted on my deadline. I walk out of my office and there's like 4 people standing there and like, can you reach that basket? It's up on the top shelf and none of us can reach it. And I'm thinking to myself, really? Like this is the emergency that's causing me stress and causing me to be pulled away from the work that I'm supposed to be doing, that by the way is on a deadline? You needed a basket on the top shelf. Like, come on. And so I think sometimes we have experiences like that in our day-to-day. It's whatever job you have. I don't know, maybe you love your job and this is like a side hustle thing. That's awesome. There were definitely parts of my job that I was very excited to jettison, put it that way. But sometimes we carry that with us into our attitude when it comes to freelancing. And I just want to let you know that's not a super helpful thing to bring to the table. Because while there are frustrations in your day job, they're not really going to fire you over some of these like minor offenses or like, oh, he was kind of rude, like we should get rid of him. It's not typically how it works. And maybe there were seasons or eras where it did, but with all the employment law that happens now, you're a little bit more protected as an employee. You have none of that as a freelancer. If I don't help this company, if I don't help them navigate the crisis that they're in, then there's a good chance that they're going to be like, well, we don't want to use Matt in the future because he wasn't super helpful when we had a problem. And so I'm not saying disregard your boundaries. Your boundaries are critically important. And I want to talk about one more thing, kind of a takeaway for me as I reflect on this. But understand that your boundaries exist for major things, but it doesn't strip your humanity. Like you can still be helpful and kind to people. And I find that that's the best way to do business, is to be helpful and kind when people are in need. The last thing that I wanted to kind of talk about here is just the value of having clarity in your contract. This was really the first project where I put together, I shouldn't say I here, because really the guy that I was working alongside did a phenomenal job of helping me learn a lot of these practices. So together, really, that's a little generous. So he basically built this really strong proposal. And what he did is he put it all together and then we started filling in the details together. And what I realized at the end of this process was that he had built a contract that was very clear. There wasn't a lot of wiggle room, and not in an oppressive way, but in a clarity way. And what that did for us is it gave us a very clear framework of what was inside or outside the boundaries or the parameters of what we were going to be doing for this client. I'll put a link in the description to the tool that he used to build this as a starting point, and then we went through and customized it from there. But one of the things that when you're in the midst of a situation like this where a client is kind of prompting you to go outside of your boundaries, it's really, really helpful to have clarity on what your boundaries even are in the first place. Because if you don't have those things in place, it's going to get really awkward because you're going to assume that, no, you shouldn't do that work, but your client is going to assume, yeah, you should. And so make sure that as you're approaching these different conversations with potential clients, that you do a good job of providing clarity. Even if you don't go as far as having like a really formal contract that, you build with a contract generator or talk to a lawyer or any of these kinds of things. Even if you have something that says, this is what I'm going to be doing for you. I'm going to be creating a new logo. I'm going to give you these deliverables. Sometimes you agree on a time frame, sometimes you don't, but like map those details out and have both parties sign it. Because then at least you have these parameters. So then if a crisis comes up like this one that we were dealing with, I could go back to my contract and say, okay, what are the things that we had mapped out? What are the parameters? What are the things we agreed to? and then we could make the decision in terms of how involved we were going to get. In terms of simple things that I'm going to take away from this and really be intentional about applying to future projects, the first is, as I'm bidding a project, I want to make sure that I build the cost of generosity into my proposal. A lot of times we're tempted to go to the very, very lowest price we can afford to do this, or we think we can afford to do this. We're always wrong. We always underbid. If you don't bid your projects accurately, which means more money, you're going to be so tight that you don't have the ability to be generous when the opportunity comes. That means that you're not going to be able to serve your clients as well as you could, and that means that there's a lower chance that they're going to continue to work with you because you're really just doing the bare minimum. So price your projects in a way that allows you some margin. It feels like you're overcharging in the beginning, but what I'm telling you is you're pricing so that you can serve your clients well. I've already mentioned the scope of work thing. Make sure that your scope of work is clear. That's super important, just because then everybody's on the same page. It helps you understand what things you should lean into or not. It also gives your clients clarity on the things that are appropriate for you to be involved in. And then the last thing here, everything's not on you. As a freelancer who is just a one-man show, it's really easy to feel like everything's on me. If I don't get everything right, then the whole thing crumbles. The reality, though, is that I have a bunch of people on my side. I have friends, I have past colleagues, I have my family, I have a group of people, I have a business group that I'm in terms of just networking with other people that are in a similar space as me. It's so important for me to see that I'm not on my own. Because if you feel like you're on your own, these things become such bigger problems or bigger stresses in your life. And that doesn't help you do your best work. Thanks so much for your time watching this video. I hope that these are helpful for you as I recount some of the moments in my week that maybe were a little bit more dramatic than I would have liked them to be. I hope that there's some takeaways that can be helpful for you in your week and the things that you face. I'd love to know, have you ever encountered something like this? Have you ever had a client reach out to you with a crisis of their own that they're asking you to lean in and kind of go outside the bounds of what you'd agreed to? Tell me more about it in the comments. If you found this helpful, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.